When you are an advanced amateur or doing 360 VR stuff on a regular and professional basis for clients and run it as a business, there will be some situations when the features you getting out of the box are not sufficient and you need to adapt it. This was done or is done in Panotour Pro with plugins from third parties, from people who can program krpano plugins for Panotour Pro. This is quite difficult and involves a very steep learning curve to be able to do these plugin programming for Panotour Pro. And you need to define everything what is configurable and what is not. And so it's not a really flexible concept what's standing behind extending Panotour Pro's standard features. So it's for professional work, it's pretty important to have a look on adaptations beyond standard features with coding or with not coding. So let's point out some topics like flexibility. In Panotour Pro, adaptation is mostly plugin based. You need krpano or third-party plugins, open or commercial ones. They are still produced even as Panotour Pro is not continued anymore. There are some people doing very nice stuff and to extend the features of Panotour Pro, and they are continuing the business. You can do it by yourself with serious krpano knowledge, but with third-party plugins, you are quite good supplied with nice features extending the basic functionality of Panotour Pro. In Pano2VR, more detailed elements allow you to configure stuff you cannot do out of the box in Panotour Pro. As these elements are much more granular, like simple text fields or one image or one button and actions you can freely define and mouse events, which are really controlled in their details compared to Panotour Pro, the flexibility out of the box without further knowledge is much higher when you use Pano2VR. The learning curve, which is quite important for people who want to invest time and money into the transition from one software to another. With Panotour Pro to krpano, if you want to have the control over everything what is done in the underlying framework, the learning curve from Panotour Pro to krpano, some people are considering it, is very steep. I'm doing a lot of krpano stuff for customers and which want very special features and some stuff like connections to databases, multi-language interfaces, and so on and so on, and you name it. And as I know krpano very well, I can state it is a very steep learning curve. You need to write code and to fully understand what this code does. And it is especially from people who are more photography focused and focused to use programs with a graphic user interface. This is really hard to learn. I really need to point out that. Pano2VR has a flat and linear learning curve. With simple knowledge and some stuff Pano2VR delivers out of the box, you can really do amazing stuff. And if you want to adapt parts of that what Pano2VR delivers, then you can make simple adaptations. For example, you can adapt some CSS styles. CSS is a web language defining typography and layout. It's pretty easy and it is more of a self-explaining. It's writing a little bit lines of code, and you can adapt Pano2VR to you or your customers liking, as implementing the right colors, the right typography, corporate design, corporate identity is really easy to adapt with Pano2VR. And if you have more knowledges like a web developer, then Pano2VR allows really complex interventions and you can interconnect Pano2VR with complex JavaScript engines to do really amazing stuff like externalize content, have an editor's team to have all your texts revised and then only linking it to Pano2VR, and Pano2VR is integrating it into its user interface. That's really nice. So with simple knowledge, you can do simple adaptations. With good knowledge, you can do complex adaptations. Directly connected with this topic is accessibility for developers. With PTB, this accessibility is complex, as you need to know the krpano framework in detail, and you need a separate API understanding how is krpano connecting itself to its environment. It's not very easy. And so you can interact with Panotour Pro tours, but you need to know how krpano is working and talking to the environment via its JavaScript API. With Pano2VR, you have pretty much open access with a simple JavaScript-based API. You can directly talk to the panorama player and to different elements, and you can pretty easy connect it to standard tools like jQuery, jQuery UI, jQuery Mobile, and all these front-end frameworks, you know, when you are dealing a little bit with web development. So it is standard technologies, and you don't need to know a special API, which is different from general known stuff. Now let's have a look to structure of the programs and features and challenges. 3 topics you will meet when you're going to make a transition from Panotour Pro to Pano2VR, and I will point out some topics to consider. Here is a little table, what different things are doing in the programs, and I'm extending it with the underlying krpano framework as it's part of the function Panotour Pro delivers to you. And if you compare Panotour Pro with Pano2VR, then the plugin elements in Panotour Pro can be compared to skin elements. These skin elements are the basic atoms Pano2VR is built from. These basic elements are plugins in Panotour Pro, and really atomic size is XML tags in krpano. It's a small code snippet doing or representing something. In Panotour Pro, you have combined structures. I consider them a little bit as macroscopic because it is one element is doing more or less complex stuff. If you have a control bar, it consists of dozens of elements with connected interactivity, and it's quite prefab and ready-made stuff with more or less small feature set which is configurable. In Pano2VR, you have more individual basic elements like simple text, a button or container, a map, or only one graphic, and it is quite elementary. In krpano, all these elements are represented by a plugin or by a layer. It is a code container containing more code, representing what is this stuff looking like, what it's doing, how it's reacting to its environment. This can be a simple text field or rectangle. And this plugin is not to be confused with a plugin structure in Panotour Pro. It's only the same name. What's a plugin? It's a code snippet. It's called plugin. Everything you're doing in the style tab, the positioning, and to determine the position of an element in the layout of your user interface, you are laying over your panorama stuff. This is done with the positioning in the skin editor and the canvas. The positioning in Panotour Pro is only done by this little 9-point square where you can click right center, right lower corner or something like that. And in Pano2VR, the positioning is in the skin editor, and this positioning is relative to its parent element and is very versatile and very flexible. And you can do it in percent and in pixel and so on. And you have much more positioning options in Pano2VR than you have in Panotour Pro. The positioning options in Pano2VR are comparable to the code positioning you have in krpano. It's quite pretty much the same concept underlying. When it comes to interactivity, in Panotour Pro, you have ready-made function blocks with selectable actions for mouse clicks. If you have a control bar, the text box has a close button, click on it and it closes. And if you have a map, you click on a hotspot and the hotspot is opening something or doing something. And these functions are more or less ready-made and you can use it, and mostly they are connected to mouse clicks for you click, and if in the moment when you release the mouse key, then the action is executed, and mostly the same for all hotspots. With Pano2VR, you have you have numerous mouse events: mouse over, mouse on, mouse leaving, mouse entering, and a lot of more elementary aspects you have for the interactivity with mouse and touch events or system events. and they can be assigned to actions for elements, and these actions are more or less freely configurable. It's nearly the same with krpano, where you have an action tag and you have program and command sequences you can completely free configure. They can do anything, communicate with other elements, communicate to the environment, and reacting or listening for stuff coming from outside, and so on. It's extremely versatile and completely free configurable. With options you have in Panotour Pro in the Style tab, these options are pre-configured. You cannot introduce your own options when they are not there. You can use the options you have, but you cannot add your own. With Pano2VR, you have extensive options to configure stuff, even with conditions, so-called logic blocks. The logic blocks are quite a powerhouse when it comes to interactivity in a panoramic user interface. And in krpano, that is even more configurable, as it is code you can write as you're liking. So to sum it up, if you like to have a buzzword how these programs are thinking, then you can consider Panotour Pro as a macroscopic aspect, a macroscopic approach. Pano2VR is elementary, and krpano is atomar, really down to very, very small pieces. And so the configurability, the options you have to configure is the least in Panotour Pro. It's medium in Pano2VR, and it is huge when it comes to krpano. So that is an overview over the three concepts, how these two programs, including the engine of Panotour Pro, three programs are dealing with everything you want to have from a user interface you built for your VR 360 tour. So to end here for this introduction video, I can only recommend evaluate Pano2VR, download the demo version, and it's fully functionally. It only renders a watermark in the results, so you have you can test it thoroughly without any limitations, and this is worthwhile a try. And with the next step, I'm planning to continue this video series with at least with these topics. In the planning up to now is, in my concept, is how to deal with hotspots in Panotour Pro and in Pano2VR. What's common, what's the differences, how is the working with in the PTP Styles tab comparable with the Pano2VR skins, and how are the map functions working, how is Panotour Pro dealing with interactions, and what can you do in Pano2VR. And what's the aspects for developers who want to extend the output of a program? What's the possibility with Panotour Pro, and what's the possibilities with Pano2VR? Below the video here, you can ask questions, and I'm very interested in feedback. And what do you want to know, and where should I keep an eye on, and what's stuff, what's especially complicated, and so on. So it's quite of an open end, and I'm setting up a project where the features are nearly comparable, and everything I have in Panotour Pro I want to exactly rebuild in Pano2VR to show you a way how to switch from one software to another. As I said, feedback is very welcome. And post your questions and your recommendations, your ideas, what needs to be topic in this transition tutorial. And you can find me and contact me here in the comments on YouTube, or send me a message, and on my blog, secondpanoramablog.com, or even on Facebook with my Facebook page. All these channels are open. Thank you much. Thank you very much. That's normal. Thank you very much for listening, and stay tuned for more.